computers and computer science and computing offered kind of a framework to understand intelligence. So I said, okay, I should study intelligence so that I can understand how the mind works. So it was not so much to do AI for building machines, but doing AI as a way of understanding the nature of intelligence. There used to be an early program called Mycin, where you would talk to the computer and it would give you medical diagnosis. Now, it reminds you in some ways today's ChatGPT, except that today's ChatGPT is way, way more sophisticated. There was a third kind of AI which was doing.
So how did it feel when you looked your work being represented on big screen, or how was that moment? Today's guest is a visionary who has shaped the world of artificial intelligence across academia, industry and social impact. Dr. P.Anandan is the former CEO of the Vadvani Institute for Artificial Intelligence, a not-for-profit research institute dedicated to using AI for social good. Before that, he served as Vice President for Research at Adobe and held several leadership roles at Microsoft Research, including founding Microsoft Research India in 2005 and building the Interactive Visual Media Group in Redmond, Seattle, USA. He's also been a professor of computer science at Yale University. But beyond these titles, what makes his journey remarkable is where it began, in a middle-class home with big dreams and relentless curiosity. Today, he shares how he rose to global leadership in AI and the lessons he learned along the way. Hello, Dr. Anandan.
Hi.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you here with us today, and thank you so much for accepting my invite.
Thank you for giving me a chance to talk about my past and work.
Yes. When I was looking at your profile, I was completely impressed. So you were born and brought up in Chennai, in Tamil Nadu, in India. And then from there, you became a professor at Yale University, which is very prestigious. And you studied AI in the 80s when it was not as flourished or as hyped as in right now. So could you take us back to those days in Chennai, and how was your journey, and how did a boy from Chennai become a professor at Yale University?
So I was born to a middle-class family in Chennai. My mother's grandfather was a professor of physics in Kerala. He's a Tamil person, but he lived in Kerala, was a professor of physics. And my mother was the first of 11 children. And my father also was the eldest, and then he had two younger siblings who were alive. And I was the fifth of 6 children. But my eldest brother passed away very young. But when I was 3, I lost my father. He died, and my sister was not even 1 year old. But my mother was stuck, really, 31 years old, 5 kids. The youngest is less than a year old. And her father, obviously, professor in those days in India, was not a rich person and had children, 11 children. So my uncle, my father's younger brother, his name is Desikan, he was only 24. And he, at my father's deathbed, told my father that he will take care of his children, that is us. And so for the next 15 years or so, he did not marry, and he basically was our provider, was like a father. In fact, till the day he died, we used to call him father. And he raised us, and he really didn't have a job when this happened, but he found himself things to do. And then later on, he became the manager for advertising in the Reader's Digest magazine in India. So he is a self-made man. But towards the later part of his life, he became a consumer activist and started a number of consumer organizations in India and nationally. And then, of course, he eventually passed away in 2015 when he was 82. But he's always been like a father. And he married in 1969 and has his own children, my cousins, so on. But my mother, was a pious woman who really gave us all the support we need. For me, my mother was everything. And my uncle, was always there helping us. And I was good at studies. I mean, most of us were. And I was sort of bright and always getting good marks and all that. So my grandfather had a wish that I would become first in the state in SSLC. So I studied hard, not because of him, but I just like studying. But unfortunately, didn't get state first. So my grandfather was, I think, disappointed. But still, I was good at studies. I finished my SSLC in Ramakrishna Mission School. I went to Loyola for PUC and then wrote the entrance exam for IIT like everybody else that time did. Not that I knew much about IIT or engineering, but was fortunate to get in with a good rank and started studying electronics. And one of the things I discovered was that I had a particular interest in mathematically oriented side of things and not the more physical engineering, physics oriented things. When I was in my third or fourth year, I came across a book in the library called The Design for a Brain by Ross Ashby, which is basically treats the brain or the intelligent system as a control system, which has an intelligent brain and then sensors and actuators and so on. I was very interested in that book. But this time, when I was studying in IIT Madras, computer science did not exist as an undergraduate discipline. In fact, the first undergraduate program in computer science started by the time we finished my degree, basically. There was a master's program. When I finished IIT, I was doing quite well, got a couple of job offers in India, and got admission to study masters in computer science in the US, and with financial support. So I came here because computer science was really my interest. I realized that computer science was more natural for me than EE. That later I realized that the math that I learned as a part of EE actually came in very handy. Anyway, so I did a master's at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, and was going to do a PhD, but then I, out of the blue, chanced interview, got a job as a software engineer at Intel, Oregon. So I was like 21, 22. So I moved to Portland, Oregon to work as an engineer. So doing that for a couple of years, having a good time, met a lot of friends, a lot of new things I learned in life. After a year or so, I realized that this software engineering job was easy and was fun, but was not fully satisfying. So I'd been reading some papers and came across a few papers on artificial intelligence from the library, and I said, this is something maybe I want to look at. And I remember it occurred to me one day that I could either just continue my engineering, maybe make money, grow in my career or whatever, or maybe search for something that's more meaningful. And my eldest brother, right, he, when my father died and so on, I think took it very personally. His name is Sundara Raman. He lives in Philadelphia now. And kind of made a vow that all his siblings would get higher education and do PhD. So he would call me once in a while. He was a postdoc at Stanford and say, so when are you going to go apply for your PhD? And I would dodge the question. But then one day it occurred to me, maybe I did want to do something which was more like a quest, right? And I thought there were three basic questions I felt that science was trying to address. And one was, what's the nature of everything, like matter, material, space, time? So that's physics, but it's been pretty much done. And then the question is, well, if there's everything, there is a particular class of things called living things, like life and non-life. So what's the nature of living things? And genetics, biology have progressed tremendously, so that was already taken. And I'm not good at biology anyway. But then the third question is, well, amongst living things, there appears to be some that show intelligent behavior and some don't. So then the question is, what's the nature of intelligent living things? And I had by this time become convinced that computers and computer science and computing offered kind of a framework to understand intelligence. So I said, okay, I should study intelligence so that I can understand how the mind works. So it was not so much to do AI for building machines, but doing AI as a way of understanding the nature of intelligence. So I've been reading some papers and came across something written by a professor at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. It's a book actually by Professor Michael Arbib called The Metaphorical Brain. And I read it and really impressed because he took a more what's called a cybernetics point of view, not just knowledge, but knowledge and doing. So sensing, thinking, reasoning, action, closed loop, and learning as an important part of it. So he was conducting a research program like that in the UMass. So I wrote to him, applied and got in. So I quit my job at Intel, moved across the country to Amherst, Massachusetts, and started studying, doing my PhD. I actually wanted to work with him, but turned out, the kind of work he was doing and I didn't quite get into it so much. And he was actually trying to simulate a frog's brain on the computer, and I didn't feel interested in that. But there was another professor working on machine learning, on something called reinforcement learning, a professor named Andrew Barto. I studied under him, and I really liked it. I wrote my first paper with him. But my contribution was mainly mathematical. As I said, I had a little talent for mathematics, so I was able to prove some theorems. But Andy didn't have the kind of money that would support a theoretical work. And Andy, by the way, last year got the Turing Award for reinforcement learning. Andy Barto and his Rich Sutton was my friend and student there. So in the meanwhile, the computer vision group at UMass was doing well, and they had got some big grants. So they approached me to see if I wanted to work on a summer project. And the particular problem they wanted me to explore was called optical flow. That is perception of movement across time, visual motion. So let's say you have a sequence of images, like you watch a video, and each frame is a still. But we see movement not because there is movement in the picture, but because the picture is played over time. So all that motion is apparent, right? It's just video playing again and again, and you see movement. How does our brain sense movement from it, and what's the nature of the process of representing that movement? And there's a lot of biological correlates to it, and the field of movement, like where every point has moved over time, is called optical flow. And back when I was studying, my PhD started in 1981, optical flow was actually recognized as an interesting and useful problem to solve. And I liked it, and it involved videos and stuff, which I enjoyed. So I started working on it. Took me a couple of years, and then I got some breakthroughs collaborating with some friends. And we came up with an algorithm for doing optical flow. So that's kind of what got me into AI, but not, what I realized is when I went to study AI at UMass, there was a particular segment of AI called computer vision, which was a very interesting field. And I was able to apply my mathematical training and so on to that. There was another kind of AI, say knowledge-based systems, which was building large systems, conversational systems. There used to be an early program called Mycin, which would where you would talk to the computer, and it would give you medical diagnosis. So this was back in the early 80s or whatever. It reminds you in some ways today's ChatGPT, except that today's ChatGPT is way, way more sophisticated. Mycin was a big knowledge base. But that work was popular, but I found it too dry. There was a third kind of AI, which was doing logical deduction and inferencing. And it was a bit more theoretical, but I tried it, and I found it not only dry, but I felt like this approach won't scale. So computer vision was more practical, something I liked doing. During my PhD, I worked on optical flow and came up with a technique which at that time was sort of became the state-of-the-art technique. In many ways, combined ideas and features from other algorithms and made them better, and it was also somewhat consistent with biological motion perception rather. So that became very successful. And at the end of my PhD, I was also at the same time not very ambitious. I was not interested in having a big career. I liked research, but I thought I would be more interested in being a teacher, and I wanted to teach in a 4-year college rather than going into research university. But my professor said, your research is very good, and I think you will get, opportunities to do research. So Yale was looking for computer vision researchers. So Yale had a small but well-known AI group. So the head of that group contacted me and wanted to interview. I did, and I got the job. So, I went to Yale partly because, the quality of undergrad students in Yale is superb, really, really good. In fact, I would say better than the grad students there in those days. And this particular group in AI was well known, and I could continue my computer vision work. So to answer your question, what got me there was really, an interest in research. But I wanted to pursue certain fundamental questions in AI, and computer vision was sort of my way of getting into AI. And I should say, today AI has gone well beyond computer vision, but for about 20 years, probably computer vision was one of the most successful subdomains of AI. And that's what got me to Yale.
That's quite some journey, like starting from Chennai and then ending up in Yale. Wow, that's really inspirational. Let's go back to your algorithm, optical flow algorithm. So it's called Black and Anandan effect, and it's been widely used in many of the computer vision application. And something that caught my attention when I was looking about it and reading about it is its usage, like in movies, like something that all of us know, like Matrix Reloaded and everything. So how did it feel when you looked your work being represented on big screen, or how was that moment?
Actually, I didn't know that they did this, honestly. Came to me as a surprise, but I'll tell you the way it happened. So when I was at Yale, I was there for 4 years, and after 4 years, I realized that the academic research environment, as much as I liked it, was a little isolating. You had to kind of mostly work alone and have your students, but I found inherently working in a group and collaborating with others, peers, was much more engaging, and I was better at it. So I quit Yale and went to work at David Sarnoff Research Center, which is now called SRI. And it was leftover from the RCA company's research lab in Princeton, New Jersey. So I went to spend a summer there with some of the colleagues and really liked the work they were doing, and we got on so well. The head of the group, Peter Burt, approached me to see if I would want to come and work there. So I basically left my job at Yale after 4 years and went there. But during the time at Yale, I had one PhD student. His name is Michael Black. Very, very bright student, and I was lucky that he became my student. And he could have chosen any area, but somehow he liked what I was doing. And he is independent, and so he took I developed my algorithm partly in my PhD, but then when I went to Sarnoff, as a group, we developed a slightly different approach. And the Sarnoff approach, in fact, kind of we used to call it the Sarnoff approach. Something was much more satisfying. It's even better than the work I did in my PhD, and we published it. And it became very well known. In 1992, we published a paper in a conference, computer vision conference, that's been very well cited. But at the same time, Michael took all of that and saw some big gaps in our work, which limited how much it could be applied. So he extended the algorithm, made it more complete, and developed what's called the Black and Anandan. Because his name is Michael Black, my name is Anandan, I was his advisor. I would say he worked largely independently, but built on top of what I did. Today, by the way, Michael is the head of research at Max Planck Institute in Tübingen, a very successful career himself. And he's gone well beyond things that I did. So he put the algorithm online and made it available as a free download. And I really didn't do those things, I just did it. But during my PhD, the algorithm I developed was actually coded by somebody else, and who put it in public domain. And they named that program after me. And I remember, this is when I was working in Sarnoff, I had gone to give a talk at DreamWorks studio in near LA, and really fun, really enjoyed the visit. And I gave a talk about optical flow and the work we were doing at Sarnoff. And at the end of my talk, they kind of invited me to visit, and we went to see the demos. And there was a demo at the time they were building the movie The Prince of Egypt, which is an animation. And they asked me, they showed me this, and I said, oh, there was a particular problem that they were trying to solve. And I said, you can use optical flow to solve that problem. He says, yeah, we know, we do. I said, oh, I used to work on it. He said, yeah, in fact, we use your program. That's the first time I learned that someone was using, a program named after me. But that was fine. Again, all this was public domain, so they didn't have to tell me or anything. So Michael, when he made it widely available, a lot of people downloaded it. And I think the movie Where Dreams May Come with Robin Williams, I think, used it. And apparently Matrix used it. And actually we learnt about it because somebody was giving a talk at the SIGGRAPH conference years later when he spoke about this, and he mentioned these things. And that's how actually Michael and I learned that. Anyway, there was a lot of fun. And when I learned, so in Matrix, basically what happened is in the first Matrix 1 rather, they have these, you might not remember, they have something called the bullet time effect, where as the bullet flies, they stop it in its motion and show from all different viewpoints. How do they do that? To do that, they had set up something like 150 or so cameras that are filming the same thing simultaneously. And when they wanted to show a different view, they would change select a different camera view. So they basically changed cameras to show the effect in time. And so they could freeze it in time or freeze it in space, whatever they want to do. But 150 cameras. So when they saw the optical flow, they realized that they don't have to have so many cameras. They can put only like 6 or 7 cameras and can create the video that would appear to come from a camera in between by combining these two. So 2 cameras here would be combined to show what would be from here. And to do that, you need optical flow, how to combine it right. And so that's why they used it. So it was a lot of fun. I mean, good to know that. But again, as I said, I don't know who else since then used it. But I should say, optical flow has become an industry standard. So if you now buy, so let's say a studio wants to buy, vision technology, there are many, many vendors who would provide optical flow as a part of that package. In fact, the other companies like Softimage and others, many people have actually used optical flow. And many of them in those days would refer to the work that we had done or base it on that. But that's a long time ago. Nowadays, optical flow itself has new algorithms that's beyond me. So,
but that's impressive, right? Like, I can only imagine to have that feeling of seeing your work being utilized in so many different ways. That must be wonderful.
In today's Artistic Spotlight, we are honored to feature Ms. Vidya Ramamurthy, who is a junior at Arizona State University studying biomedical engineering. Through her artistic journey, she has explored oil, acrylic, charcoal, and color pencil mediums. This image symbolically explores the intersection between humans and technology. With the increase in AI, understanding human nature in technological context is becoming a priority. In this image, a human hand and a robotic hand reach towards each other, evoking connection, tension, and a potential collaboration. The contrast between warmth of the human hand and the mechanical precision of the robotic hand highlights the evolving relationship. We wish Ms. Vidya Ramamurthy all the very best